The scream cut through the afternoon air like a blade. I dropped my coffee mug and ran outside to find my 11-year-old daughter Emma on the ground, convulsing from a taser shock, while Barbara Chen stood over her with that smug smile I'd grown to hate. Vandalism is a serious offense in Riverside Gardens, Barbara announced to the gathering crowd, her HOA enforcement badge gleaming in the sunlight. Even children must learn community standards. Emma's sidewalk chalk butterfly, wings spread in brilliant pink and purple across the concrete, was already being pressure washed away by Barbara's assistant. The same butterfly Emma drew every week to remember her mother, who died in a car accident 2 years ago. I'm Detective Michael Torres, and I've spent 15 years working federal cases. But nothing in my career prepared me for the moment I watched an HOA officer electrocute my daughter for creating art. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," I told Barbara as I lifted Emma into my arms. She laughed. "Threatening an HOA compliance officer is another violation, Mr. Torres. You'll be receiving multiple citations." Barbara had no idea that threatening a federal agent's family was about to become her worst nightmare. Before we dive deeper, drop a comment with your location and what time you're watching. I love connecting with viewers who believe children deserve protection, not punishment. This wasn't Barbara's first power trip. For 8 months, she'd been terrorizing Riverside Gardens residents with her fake authority and real taser. The HOA board had given her a made-up title, Community Standards Enforcement Coordinator, and she'd turned it into a personal dictatorship. Mrs. Rodriguez received a $500 fine for her garden gnomes being culturally inappropriate. The Johnson family was cited for their teenage son's basketball hoop creating noise pollution. Single mother Lisa Park got threatened with legal action because her daughter's toys were visible from the street. But Barbara saved her special attention for families she deemed problematic, minorities, single parents, anyone who dared question her authority. She carried that taser like a badge of honor, claiming the HOA authorized her to maintain order through necessary force. The truth was simpler and more sinister. Barbara Chen was a retired insurance adjuster with control issues who'd found the perfect legal loophole to terrorize her neighbors. The HOA charter mentioned reasonable enforcement measures, and Barbara had decided that meant she could play cop with real weapons. Emma's chalk art had been Barbara's obsession for months. Every Sunday, Emma would draw butterflies on the sidewalk outside her house, always in the same spot, always washing away with the next rain. Barbara called it repetitive property defacement and demanded I stop it. "That child needs discipline," she'd told me during our last confrontation. "And if you won't provide it, the community will." I documented every interaction, every threat, every abuse of power. As a federal detective, I knew how to build a case. What I didn't know was how far Barbara would escalate before I could stop her. The answer came that Tuesday afternoon when Emma's butterfly became Barbara's breaking point. After the taser incident, I rushed Emma to the hospital. The doctors confirmed she'd received a 50,000-volt shock, enough to stop an adult's heart, on an 11-year-old girl who weighed 78 pounds. While Emma recovered, I made some calls, not to lawyers or local police. To people who handle federal civil rights violations. "Mike, this is Agent Sarah Kim from Civil Rights Division. I need you to document everything. If an HOA officer used a weapon on a minor for artistic expression, we're looking at federal charges." The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Not as a concerned parent, but as a federal law enforcement officer reporting systematic abuse of power under color of authority. Barbara had made 3 critical mistakes. First, she'd used a weapon on a child. Second, she'd done it while claiming government authority she didn't possess. Third, she'd targeted Emma for exercising her First Amendment rights. Each mistake was a separate federal felony. I spent the week gathering evidence, security footage from neighbors showing Barbara's previous confrontations, medical records from Emma's hospital visit, expert testimony about taser effects on children, financial records showing the HOA never authorized weapon purchases or enforcement actions. Most damaging was Barbara's own documentation. She kept detailed logs of every violation she'd issued, complete with photos and personal commentary. Her notes about Emma's chalk art revealed months of obsessive monitoring and escalating threats. Subject continues defiant artistic displays despite multiple warnings. Read one entry. Parental authority insufficient, community enforcement required. Barbara had documented her own federal crimes in meticulous detail. The preliminary hearing was supposed to be routine. Barbara's lawyer had convinced her that local judges wouldn't challenge HOA authority over a simple community standards dispute. She was wrong on every count. Judge Martinez called the hearing to order in a packed courtroom. Barbara sat confidently at the defendant's table, still wearing her fake enforcement badge, still convinced her HOA position protected her from real consequences. Ms. Chen, Judge Martinez began, "You're charged with assault with a deadly weapon, child endangerment, and violation of civil rights under color of law. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Barbara's lawyer responded. "My client was acting within her authority as a duly appointed HOA enforcement officer. The alleged victim was engaging in repeated property vandalism despite multiple warnings. That's when I stood up in the gallery. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that directly contradicts the defendant's claimed authority." Barbara turned around, rolling her eyes. "Mr. Torres, this is a courtroom, not a parent-teacher conference. You can't just—" I pulled out my FBI credentials and badge, holding them clearly visible to the judge and court reporter. "Detective Michael Torres, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Civil Rights Division. I'm the victim's father and the investigating officer on this federal case." The silence in that courtroom was absolute. Barbara's mouth fell open, her lawyer dropped his pen. Even Judge Martinez leaned forward with obvious interest. "Agent Torres," the judge said carefully, "are you saying this case involves federal charges?" "Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Chen has been operating under fraudulent authority, using weapons against children, and systematically targeting minority families. She's facing federal civil rights violations that carry mandatory minimum sentences." Barbara finally found her voice. "That's impossible. I work for the HOA. I have enforcement authority." I addressed the court directly. "Your Honor, I've reviewed the HOA charter, city ordinances, and state regulations. No homeowner association has authority to arm civilians or authorize weapon use against residents. Ms. Chen has been impersonating a law enforcement officer while committing assault with a deadly weapon." Judge Martinez studied my credentials carefully. "Agent Torres, what federal charges are pending?" "Violation of civil rights under color of law, assault with a deadly weapon, child endangerment, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of constitutional rights. Each charge carries 10 to 20 years in federal prison." Barbara's confidence evaporated like water on hot concrete. She whispered frantically with her lawyer, who looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. "Your Honor," her attorney stammered, "we weren't aware of the federal implications." My client believed she was acting within HOA guidelines. Judge Martinez wasn't buying it. "Counselor, ignorance of federal law isn't a defense for using weapons against children. And claiming HOA authority for criminal acts makes this worse, not better." The prosecution presented our evidence methodically. Emma's medical records showing taser burns. Security footage of Barbara's systematic harassment. Her own written logs documenting months of targeting specific families. Financial proof that the HOA never authorized weapons or enforcement actions. Most damaging was Barbara's recorded statement to police. "I did what was necessary to maintain community standards. If parents won't control their children, someone has to." She'd confessed to premeditated assault on camera. Judge Martinez called for recess, but when court resumed, his decision was swift and final. "Ms. Chen, you used a potentially lethal weapon against an 11-year-old child for drawing chalk art. You claimed government authority you never possessed. You systematically targeted families based on discriminatory criteria. This court finds you guilty on all charges." Barbara stood frozen as the judge continued. "Federal sentencing guidelines mandate 15 years minimum for civil rights violations involving weapons and children. However, given the systematic nature of your crimes and complete lack of remorse, this court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison, followed by 10 years supervised probation. The courtroom erupted. Barbara collapsed into her chair, finally understanding that her fake badge couldn't protect her from real consequences. The federal investigation revealed Barbara's crimes were far worse than anyone suspected. She'd been systematically targeting minority families, single mothers, and anyone who challenged her authority. The taser incident with Emma was the culmination of 8 months of escalating abuse. 17 families came forward with evidence of harassment, threats, and discriminatory enforcement. The HOA board was held liable for enabling her actions, resulting in a $2.3 million settlement that was distributed among the victims. Emma's portion went into a college fund, but more importantly, she started drawing again. Not just butterflies, but entire gardens of chalk art that neighbors began enjoying. What started as one little girl's memorial to her mother became a community celebration of creativity and healing. The new HOA board implemented strict oversight procedures and banned all enforcement weapons. They established a resident rights committee and created appeals processes for any citations. Most importantly, they recognized that community standards should build people up, not tear children down. Barbara's 25-year sentence sent shockwaves through the HOA industry nationwide. Federal prosecutors used her case to establish precedent for civil rights violations in residential communities. Her mugshot became a cautionary tale for power-hungry board members everywhere. 6 months after the sentencing, Emma and I stood in the same spot where she'd been tased. She knelt down with a full set of Sidewalk chalk and began drawing not just one butterfly, but dozens, in every color imaginable. Mrs. Rodriguez brought her grandchildren to add flowers. The Johnson family contributed a rainbow. Even former HOA opponents stopped to add positive messages and colorful designs. What had been a site of trauma became a symbol of community, healing, and artistic freedom. "Dad," Emma said, stepping back to admire the collaborative masterpiece, "do you think Mom would like it?" I knelt beside her, seeing not just chalk art but the resilience of a little girl who'd turned her worst day into something beautiful. "Baby, I think she'd be proud of how brave you are. And I think she'd love that our whole community is drawing with you now." Barbara Chen thought her fake badge gave her real power over other people's children. She learned that federal badges carry consequences she never imagined. Today, Riverside Gardens is a different community. Children play freely, families express their cultures proudly, and art blooms on sidewalks without fear. Emma's weekly butterfly drawings continue, but now they're surrounded by contributions from neighbors who learned that standing together protects everyone. The most beautiful part, Barbara's 25-year sentence means Emma will graduate college, start her career, and possibly raise her own children before her attacker sees freedom again. That's not revenge, that's justice. If someone in authority is abusing your family, document everything, know your rights, and never be afraid to call for help. Sometimes the person being targeted has exactly the resources needed to fight back. What would you have done in my situation? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story inspired you, subscribe for more tales where justice doesn't just win, it protects the innocent.